Guten Abend, Kinder, and welcome back to Union Smack. Do you know what? I don't usually interrupt an intro like this, but I would have done the whole welcome back Smackheads thing in German, but I don't speak German. I know Guten Abend, and I know Nine, and something else, but I'm not Auf Wiedersehen. Do you know, in hindsight, this intro was very, very poorly judged. Apologies for that. Anyway, welcome back to Union Smack. I am the Maniac Matt Tennant, with you once again for another edition, another retro review, as we go down memory lane and we look at German fan favourites 2 from the Coliseum home video archives. But first, you can find me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. You can find Travis on Twitter at The Hibiki TMD. Log on to unionsmack.bigcartel.com, grab yourself an official shirt, and log on to completelynovel.com where you can purchase my Undertaker book, A Trip Down Death Valley. I will also be on the channel with you for the remainder of the month until Travis returns, and you can catch me on Muted with Bubba and a Major League podcast of their own with TJ. Now, I hear everybody ask, why German fan favourites 2? Well, he says, looking like an absolute cunt. This was meant to be a Money in the Bank review, but I didn't want to review a whole pay-per-view on my own, okay? I'll be honest. I wasn't up for that at all. So I flicked through the Coliseum video archive and I landed on German fan favourites. I had the video of this when I was a child. It was originally released in 1992 and it was a really, really good VHS. Like, it was solid. It had things on it like the first ever ladder match between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. It had Bret Hart beating Ric Flair for the WWF Championship, And it also had, I think it was Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels versus Randy Savage and Bret Hart, which was an excellent tag team match. Like some true hidden gem, that match. However, I got the wrong release. This is German fan favourites 2, and I only really realised that after I'd watched the first match and then went back online and looked at the reviews for, the show I thought this was. So this isn't the classic I remember. Absolutely certainly not. Instead, this is the sequel, the follow-up. And we all know sequels are never as good as the first. However, by the time I'd watched the first match, I was committed. So I thought, do you know what? They don't have the first one on WWE Network anyway. I don't believe I have it on DVD, though I might if I scour through my collection. So this is what we've got this week. A Union Smack retro review of German fan favourites 2. It's not the original that I wanted to do. It's not the Money in the Bank review as promised. But do you know what? We're going to make it as entertaining for you as I possibly can. Though I promise you will be sick and tired of Lex Luger when we've finished this. So before we get into this 1 hour 52 minute release, I am going to take a drink, give my voice a tiny bit of a rest, and I will leave you in the capable hands of the former NXT UK / WWE United Kingdom champion, the greatest United Kingdom champion there's ever been, the king himself, the bruiserweight, Pete Dunne.
I'm the bruiserweight Pete Dunne, and you're listening to the Union Smack podcast.
WWF German fan favourites 2 began with, thankfully, no silly skits or sketches. No one broke down on the side of a motorway or trying to find the perfect stamp in a stamp shop. Just Gorilla Monsoon sat in a chair in front of a green screen with a WWF logo on it. Simple. Sometimes simple is better. And he was just explaining what the VHS was all about. Now, obviously, it's a sequel of the first. They told us that the first was so popular that they had to do another one. And as far as I remember, I never really knew whether fans actually wrote into WWF or if these compilations were just WWF selecting what they thought we wanted to see. However, upon a little bit of research, because believe it or not, I do some research for these shows once in a blue moon, the readers of the German edition of the WWF magazine were actually invited to write in with their match suggestions. So that is where it came from. I never remember the British WWF magazine, or the British version of the WWF magazine, ever inviting the Brits to write in. But I suppose they must have done, because they did do a UK fan favourites, and maybe that's where we will go next time. German fan favourites 2 kicked off with Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels inside a steel cage. And it is the lovely old blue steel cage that we all miss. The classic WWF steel cage, which was actually made into a toy for the WWF scale ring from Hasbro. I remember that, used to have it. It was plastic and bent easy, but it looked amazing. Now, Johnny Polo was on commentary with Gorilla Monsoon for this match, and Johnny Polo was absolutely fucking terrible. I've never known Raven, or Scott Levy, or whatever you prefer to call him, to be a master of the mic. Though, arguably, he probably was in ECW as Raven, but here on commentary with Gorilla, absolutely horrendous. As for the match itself, it plays out as you would assume it does. Bret Hart takes a beating to begin with. Michaels uses the cage to his advantage, even trying to injure Bret Hart's knee with the steel, which he does. He tries to escape at every available opportunity, as a cowardice babyface should. There is a nice moment here when Bret Hart is scaling the cage and he's almost at the top, but then Michaels grabs his leg and he swings him hard, and Bret just crotches himself on the top rope, but he doesn't just sit there. It's down, one crotch, and a massive bounce back up. He takes it very, very well. That is one of the highlights of this match. There is some legitimate drama when Bret Hart almost escapes, but Michaels jumps up the side of the cage and grabs him by the hair, pulls him back in. This spot, it didn't stun me, I wouldn't say, but it surprised me a lot, because that's a babyface move to stop the heel getting out. Pulling them back in by the hair. I've seen several cage matches where Shawn Michaels was about to escape and the babyface grabbed him by the hair and he just dangled literally by his hair until he was pulled back in. So it was nice to see that they'd reversed that. Hart plays on the injured knee. Michaels goes to work on it. It's all very good stuff. It's not their classic match. This won't ever be remembered in the wider history of Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, but it is a decent enough match to kick this off. The end comes when both men fight each other to the outer cage wall, and you can see the end coming a mile off. Hart rams Michaels' head into the steel, and just before that, you can see Michaels put his foot through the hole in the cage to catch him when he falls. He falls backwards predictably, foot caught, hung upside down, and Bret Hart drops to the outside to win. This match went about 13 minutes. It should have been 23 minutes to at least 30, because there was other stuff on this VHS release that really didn't belong here and took so much time to get through that if they'd have cut that out, given the time to this, then it would have been a much, much better match and a much better VHS release all round. Next up was Razor Ramon versus Diesel for the WWF Intercontinental Championship. Now, I'm not sure where this took place. It wasn't Raw. I think it was a Superstars taping, and it was aired on television as part of WWF Superstars. This is, I think it's a month after, it might be 2 months after Razor won the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 10 against Shawn Michaels in that ladder match. And this gets off to a real quick start. Like, there's no pissing about here. There's no, like, ring the bell, lock up. Razor charges down the aisle. He stuns Diesel with hard rights. Diesel gets back into control with a hangman choke over the top rope. But there's genuine tension as Razor gets himself back into the match. You know, will the champion prevail, or will this indomitable heel just run over him? He hits a lovely bulldog on Diesel, and as he begins to topple Diesel, you can see the fans coming back into it. He slams him, which gets a huge pop. Shawn gives Diesel the advantage with a distraction, and then Michaels, tries to take off the top turnbuckle, but Razor Ramon whips Diesel into him, sends Michaels flying into the aisle in a lovely bump. He takes a lovely bump. Sadly, the one thing I didn't like about this, because it was a really good match, for television, it wasn't as good as a SummerSlam match, which they'd build to in the coming months, but for a television match, this was really, really good. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe when I watched this as a kid, they went to the break, and when they came back, Diesel had won the match, and they had to show you on replay how it happened. I will always have a memory of that happening, at least on British television. I don't know how it was over in America. But they had made cuts to this match, and it was obvious that they'd made cuts to it. And that's a shame, because it was a really good match. I didn't need to cut it at all. Especially when you consider, you know, they give almost 20 minutes to Crush and Tatanka on this VHS. They could have included the entire bout. But there are flashes of White in this match, and it transitions to another part. And it's sad, because it was a great match for television. It was never dull, on the go, had great pace to it, and then came the end. And it was a genuinely shocking end, I think, especially after Razor had won the title so soon at WrestleMania. The turnbuckle is now exposed, thanks to Shawn Michaels. Diesel Irish whips Razor Ramon into the buckle. He hits hard, staggers out, and gets caught with a jackknife powerbomb. 1, 2, 3. New Intercontinental Champion crowned on television, which in itself was shocking, because back then we didn't always get that. You know, it was rare for a title to change hands anywhere but pay-per-view in the early 90s. Yeah, Bret Hart beat Ric Flair on a house show for the WWF Championship, but there were overriding factors deciding that. So to see someone lose a title, especially a title like the Intercontinental Championship, on television so soon after he'd won it at WrestleMania in that classic ladder match, it was the right decision for me, because not only, you know, did it provide the shock value to keep people watching every week, you know, what would happen, who could be the next babyface or heel to lose their championship, tune in and find out, but it also started the Diesel Razor Ramon push towards SummerSlam. And if you've never seen the SummerSlam 94 match, I suggest you go and check that out, because it is a very good match between Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Maybe one of the best singles matches I've ever had, if my memory serves me right. At least I enjoyed it anyway. But do, you know, if you're going to watch this release on the back of this review, do check out this match, because it's a very, very good entry Second good match on a Coliseum video VHS, which is rare in itself. And it ends with that iconic Diesel Razor pose where Michaels jumps off the steps into his arms and they walk away with the Intercontinental Championship. And despite what people may say about Diesel's Intercontinental Championship reign, and it wasn't great, not in the slightest was it any good at all. But this match and the story with Razor was arguably the best part of it, along with their SummerSlam 94 bout. We are taken back to Gorilla Monsoon, who tells us that WWF have been so flooded with letters by the German fans that it would have taken 100 tapes to get them all on. Now, it's a bit of an exaggeration. I'm not sure how well WWF magazine sold in Germany in 1993/1994, but I can imagine they got quite a few letters. But to over exaggerate and say 100, anyone can spot the bullshit a mile off. Gorilla then introduces us to the next match, and it goes downhill steadily, the VHS, from here. Jeff Jarrett versus Lex Luger. And I bet as soon as I mentioned Jeff Jarrett, you went, oh, can't be too bad. And then when I mentioned Lex Luger, you went, oh yeah, this is going to be a shit show. Gorilla Monsoon on commentary again. He jests with us at the beginning of this match. And last time out, the retro review of Bashed in the USA, I complained heavily about Gorilla Monsoon's commentary with Lord Alfred Hayes, and quite rightly, it was absolutely atrocious. Both men should have been ashamed of themselves. However, Gorilla Monsoon's commentary is actually the best part of this match. He starts off before the match even begins by saying that he used to look like Lex Luger, but couldn't make money from it, so he let himself go. It's a great line, and it brings a smile to the face. Sadly, this match will wipe it off pretty darn quick. Now, credit where credit's due. Jeff Jarrett tries to get something good from Lex Luger. You can see him really trying. He pokes away, bumps well, throws himself around the ring now and again, pads the match with holds to give Lex Luger a chance. But this is 1994 Lex Luger. You can't work or expect miracles. This descends into a slow pace to suit Luger, and the downside of that is that it's just not very entertaining at all. The constant punches, the constant rest hold. Luger, bear in mind this is a 15-minute match, okay? Lex Luger takes a beating, I would say, for about 14 minutes, 20 seconds of this. This should have been 3 minutes. He should have finished Jarrett off, looked strong, and no one would have cared or batted an eyelid. Let's not forget, this was only released on VHS, so it wouldn't have hurt Jarrett at all, and it would have been far more entertaining and not wasted our lives watching it. I say our lives, my life, because after this review, you're obviously not going to watch this match back. You'd be a fool to do so. And just think where else this time could have been allocated. You could have had 10 more minutes of that steel cage match, which would have made it a classic. But no, you give it to Lex Luger. As if the match wasn't bad enough, Jeff Jarrett then slaps on the sleeper hold to Lex Luger, and I shit you not, this has to be 3 minutes long. This sleeper hold has to be at least 3 minutes long. It's so dull. And yes, it helps to give Lex Luger a breather, but it stops the match dead 12 minutes in. 12 minutes in, match is done. Stick a fork in it, it's done. Luger looks like he's been masturbating all day on his little tour bus. He's so sweaty and worn out. And then he does a Hulk Hogan. He hulks up, stalling suplex, punches, scoop slam, Rebel Rack for the submission victory. There is no reason this should have been 15 minutes long. 3 minutes, In, out, bing bang bosh, done. And let's not forget, this was, I believe, after WrestleMania 10. So there was nothing to build him up for. He'd already lost to Yokozuna twice. At least failed to capture the WWF Championship twice. What was left? All he had to come was a feud with Crush, a feud with Tatanka and the $1 Million Corporation, and then a tag team with Davey Boy that, as much as I love the British Bulldog, really went nowhere at all. Absolute joke that they still were pushing Luger in 1994 as someone who had to really appear invincible. Next cab off the rank. Oh dear God. Tatanka versus Crush in a lumberjack match, and this was actually a King of the Ring qualifying match from Monday Night Raw. And when the graphic popped up that whoever from wherever in Germany had just requested Tatanka versus Crush, I mean, why would you in 1994? Then my soul just died. And honestly, I shit you not when I say this was every colour of awful that you could ever paint. It begins with the Lumberjacks in a huge face-off at the beginning. And the Lumberjacks are the best thing about this match, because the in-ring is absolutely fucking hideous. The cameraman gives us a good laugh when he tries to shoot outside the ring. Just a little tip. If you're trying to shoot from outside the ring, probably best not to do it from behind Yokozuna. You could barely see anything. This was punch, kick, rest, hold, punch, kick, rest, hold, repeat. There was very, very little else. Tatanka did a lovely arm drag, which was fine, I suppose. It had the usual lumberjack booking where both men inevitably ended up on the outside of the ring so the lumberjacks could have a cheap shot at them. And this as well. Now, believe it or not, this match is edited for time, and yet, at the time, in 94, this went nearly 19 minutes on VHS. I can't even begin to fathom how long this went on television. What could it have been? 25 minutes? Maybe even 30? Hideous. There's no reason Tatanka and Crush should have been allocated a 20 minutes on an edition of Monday Night Raw, whether this was a King of the Ring qualifying match or not. Now, Vince McMahon and Randy Savage were on commentary. Yes, I know. They kept alluding to the fact that Lex Luger wasn't at ringside. Now, at the time, Lex Luger was in a feud with Crush, a forgotten feud for good reason. And this was also building towards the Lex Luger Tatanka storyline for SummerSlam, where Luger would be questioned about his loyalties as a babyface, and it was all a mystery who would join Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation. Would Luger sell out? Would Tatanka sell out? And of course, we all know that it ended up being Tatanka. The most exciting part of this match, sadly, was when the Lumberjacks really get into it on the outside. It starts with Bam Bam Bigelow and Ramon, and then it just turns into a big schmoz. Everyone's going at it. It's a mass of humanity until Lex Luger finally appears, because as if he wouldn't. When Crush falls to the outside and Luger nails him with the bionic elbow, rolls him back inside, and Tatanka pins Crush to advance to the 1994 King of the Ring to face, I believe it was, Owen Hart. I'm not going to state that, nearly 20 minutes wasn't needed, and it wasn't needed with edits. But this was the longest match on the show. The main event, which, no spoilers, would see Lex Luger versus Diesel, would clock in at, I think, the second longest, about 17.5 minutes. I do not know what possessed WWE or Marty Applebaum, if he was still around at this time, to just include this on a release. Like, nobody cared about Crush in 94. No one cared about Tatanka in 94, hence why they turned him heel, to try and get more eyes on him and more people interested in him. And I don't believe anybody wrote in asking for this match. If they did, then this should have been taped at a house show. It should have been 5 minutes, and that is it. Not a 20-minute match in the middle of a VHS. Terrible. Next up, we got Undertaker versus Bam Bam Bigelow. This was recorded early in 1993, so they're really digging through the archives here. This was during The Undertaker's hideous 1993 stint in WWF, where he was just given giant after giant after giant. First it was Giant Gonzalez, then Mr. Hughes. I think there were one or two others. Bam Bam Bigelow was the best of them. You know, no one's ever going to look at Bam Bam Bigelow and Giant Gonzalez in the same sentence and say Gonzalez was the better wrestler. If you do, you shouldn't be watching professional wrestling. As for this match, it was taped at a Superstars taping. This was your standard big man match. There was a nice drop toe hold by The Undertaker. Bigelow tries to wear him down with a series of headbutts, misses his patented flying headbutt from the top rope, and Bigelow then walks away, but Tatanka attacks. Now, I have a problem with this. Of course I do. Tatanka attacked Bam Bam Bigelow in the aisle. No provocation from Bigelow. He was literally just walking out the match. And yet the referee, who is staring at both Bigelow and Tatanka as they brawl down the aisle, does not call for a disqualification. By rights, Bam Bam Bigelow should have won this by disqualification, but do you know what? Logic doesn't matter on a Coliseum home video. So Taker wins with a choke slam as Bam Bam Bigelow rolls back in. You won't want to go out your way to see this. Sadly, 93 Undertaker wasn't great. He was still very green. Bam Bam Bigelow could have carried him to a 15-minute decent match, but I believe, watching The Undertaker in 1993, his lack of decent opponents really rubbed off on him and began to catch up with him. If you want to read more about The Undertaker's 1993 run, or his run in any year of his career, then do pick up my book, The Undertaker, A Trip Down Death Valley, from CompletelyNovel.com now. There's a cheap pop and plug that Mick Foley would be proud of. We were taken back to Gorilla Monsoon, sat in his chair. This wasn't a long link, thank God. He says that he knows what we want to see. And apparently, judging by what's next, we want to see a rerun of the WrestleMania 10 main event, because somebody from somewhere in Germany has apparently written in and asked for Yokozuna versus Bret Hart. So instead of going out of their way to do a 10-minute match, WWE just rerun the main event. Now, I'm not against this being on a Coliseum home video release that isn't WrestleMania 10, but this match highlights the problem I have with some of these releases. They're meant to be matches that we've never seen before, but a lot of them are from TV or pay-per-view. Still, this remains an underrated main event, in my opinion. Maybe one of WrestleMania's most underrated main events. This was, of course, for the WWF Championship, and for those not in the know, both Bret Hart and Yokozuna had wrestled earlier in the night. Bret Hart had opened WrestleMania 10 with a stunner against Brother Owen, which Owen won, and injured Bret's leg along the way, which will play into this match. And Yokozuna had already defeated Lex Luger to retain the WWF Championship with Mr. Perfect as the special guest referee. Now, they work with Bret's bad leg here. Zuna uses his size to tell a good David versus Goliath story. Bret's fight back is valiant, and you can really see and feel the audience getting behind him, even all these years later. And I say all these years later because it's still crazy to me to think that WrestleMania 10 was 26 years ago. Roddy Piper is the special guest referee for this match, and he's a good distraction. His little comings together with Yokozuna and with Fuji and Cornette on the outside serve as a nice side dish to this match, because it wasn't all on Yokozuna, it wasn't all on Bret Hart. Piper was there to provide the distraction as well. And the end, I think, in my personal opinion, it's one of the most classic endings to a WrestleMania main event, or a WrestleMania match even. I've seen it get bashed time and time again. People are always talking about, how ridiculous it looked. But think of it this way. Yokozuna was exhausted for a man of his size. He'd already fought Lex Luger earlier in the evening. That had to have gone like 10 minutes, if not more. So, going into this, fighting a gallant Bret Hart who wasn't going to give up, he was tired. So, as he climbed the rope for the banzai drop, exhaustion kicked in and he tumbled backwards. He made a mistake because he was so tired, opened the door, and Bret Hart rolled him up for the victory. Logically, the sharpshooter was never going to be an option. I know Bret Hart had put the sharpshooter on Yokozuna before, but the story of this was Bret was going into it with a bad leg. He wasn't going to get Yokozuna over for the sharpshooter with said injury, and so they had to come up with a way that Yokozuna could logically lose without dropping any heat or, without denting his image. I don't think this dented his image. I think it worked very well. I like the ending, but it remains open for debate. So Bret Hart wins, and you have a new WWF champion. Well worth the watch. Classic WrestleMania. So do go back and give that a try. Next up was another championship match, but this time the WWF Tag Team Championships, as the Quebecers defended against the Headshrinkers, and this was from another episode of Monday Night Raw. Now, for me, the Headshrinkers never worked as a babyface. I'm obviously in the majority because the fans here absolutely loved them. They popped for everything they did when the Headshrinkers were working their way towards the titles at the end of the match, when there was a little communication breakdown between the Quebecers. Fans were on their feet for this, so I'm in the minority, but that's the way a wrestling show works. There's opinions on both sides, and nobody's wrong, because it's just an opinion. I remember this match vividly from my childhood. As vividly as SummerSlam 92, as vividly as the Bulldog beating Bret Hart, as vividly as Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair from Monday Night Raw. And if I have to go out on a limb, this would rank in maybe my top 10 favourite tag team matches of all time. It was absolutely brilliant, especially for the time as well. This is 1994, when WWF's tag team division wasn't stacked high. You had teams like Well Done and the Smoking Guns, but there was no actual top quality in there. The Quebecers were quality. The Headshrinkers were very, very good indeed, just not as a babyface team. As for the match, Jacques provided the majority of the entertainment here and the links between tags and moves. Pierre comes off the top rope to break up a pin, but hits Jacques instead. That will be important later on. The Quebecers do the old Money Inc. thing halfway through the match. They get impounded, so they leave and retreat backstage. However, the old adage of if they don't return, they will lose the WWF Tag Team Championships is brought into play, and fans loved this. Like, you'd have thought that Bret Hart had just won the title again. They absolutely nearly took the roof off when that declaration was made. There have been edits to this, quite obviously, as there have been to other matches, which is a shame. The Quebecers take charge with a wonderful clothesline on Fatu, who sells it beautifully. He spins in the air several times, in fact, and for a man of his size at that time, because you could see he was starting to pile on the pounds, that is some feat. But I think he did it when he was Rikishi as well, so credit to him for being that agile. We've never really talked about the Quebecers on Union Smack, and I wish Travis was here to do so with me. And I don't know whether he'd agree, but after he's listened to this, he'll obviously tweet me on Twitter, and we'll have a discussion about it. But for me, the Quebecers worked so well together. It's like they're also one of my favourite teams of the 90s. I loved the Mountie as a singles wrestler, but there was something about Jacques and Pierre that just worked so well for me. They had the tag team psychology down. They worked the heel style so well. There was even instances, not just here, but throughout their entire run. I mean, maybe not with their matches with Men on a Mission, but, we're all eager to forget them. But where they cut the ring in half as well. Real brainbuster style. But they don't get the credit they deserve. Here, they executed a lovely sort of trip clothesline double team, which you didn't see in 1994. It was all very, vanilla, if you like. And this match is all go. It's all go, and it's just a taste of what both teams were capable of if the shackles were taken off. Legitimate drama, Samu's head caught in the ropes, and then the end comes. The Quebecers miss their finishing move. Captain Lou Albano and Afa, who are on the outside of the ring for the Headshrinkers, they deal with Johnny Polo. The referee does not see the Headshrinkers tag. Jacques hits Pierre by mistake, and then Pierre has had enough. He turned and he hit Jacques on purpose in a temper, because the Quebecers had had quite a few problems with miscommunication in the weeks before this in order to lay the foundations for how they were going to lose the tag team titles. The Headshrinkers pounce, and Fatu pins Jacques with the flying splash, and you have new WWF Tag Team Champions. Now, even if you weren't fans of the Quebecers, even if you weren't fans of the Headshrinkers, then I urge you to go back and watch this. 94, 95 wasn't great for WWF creative-wise. There were very, very few memorable matches. They were very few and far between. But this is a hidden gem. And this just goes to show that they could do tag team wrestling properly if they so wanted to. They didn't want to often, WWF, but with the right teams and the right amount of time, it could be done to effect. And this should have main evented the release, because what was to come next just was not a main event in anyone's eyes. What is he talking about, I hear you ask? Well, I am talking, of course, about, dear God, Lex Luger. Yes, he's back again, versus Diesel. Now, this was Intercontinental Champion Diesel, and I shit you not again, this went almost 18 minutes. Lex Luger, 1994 Lex Luger, and 1994 Diesel. 18 minutes, almost. This was taken from Monday Night Raw. This was actually the main event of the Monday Night Raw after Bret Hart versus the 1-2-3 Kid, which they should have put on here. Jim Ross on commentary laughably tries to compare this with Hart versus Kid. Ridiculous. And obviously it was right in the middle of the Lex Luger Tatanka who will sell out to Ted DiBiase storyline, which is all they really had for Lex Luger going forward. It was Crush, and then Tatanka, and then Luger died a death at the end of 94 until the Allied Powers with Davey Boy came along. It's an odd way to end the tape as well. Like I said, they should have ended it with a tag team match, end on a massive high, but it ended on a whimper. This was a different Lex Luger as well to the year previous. Let's not forget, 1 year ago, he was hyped, he had the Lex Express, he was heading into SummerSlam to battle Yokozuna for the WWF Championship. There was real hope and optimism around the man made in the USA, Lex Luger, in 1993. Fast forward a year, and he'd already lost twice to Yokozuna. He'd failed to capture the championship. His Royal Rumble victory was tainted by the fact that Bret Hart was co-winner, and he'd had no luck. He had no real good opponents, and the company and fans had lost interest in him as a result of that. Now, the only real thing that I can point out here, and it wasn't a terrible match, it was just fine. Luger did a decent sunset flip. That's about it. I won't say this was as bad as the match with Jeff Jarrett earlier on the release, but, it came close. Luger wins by disqualification after Shawn Michaels and Ramon get involved. It's a feel-good moment to finish, but it's not a feel-good match to finish, if that makes sense. Gorilla Monsoon is back to bid us adieu by promising that after the success of the first German fan favourites, and obviously this one, there will be a third. That never happened. Coliseum video releases, at least original Coliseum video releases, sort of petered out shortly after the beginning of 1995, so we never got a third instalment, which is a shame because this one was more than decent, I'm going to say. And the first edition, volume, instalment, whatever you prefer to call it, was one of the best Coliseum video releases they ever put out. I would love WWE to upload that to the channel if they can ever find it in their deep archives. And I would love to review it for you if they do so. If you still have it in your collection, then upload it to YouTube and notify me so I can watch it again. We'll give you a credit on the channel. More so than any other Coliseum video releases, this was head and tails, especially above the ones we've reviewed in recent weeks. WrestleFest was crap, and Bashed in the USA wasn't much better at all. You do get every major championship defended and changing hands on this VHS, which is a plus. And with the exception of maybe 4 matches, this is a decent watch. So do go out of your way to tune in to German Fan Favourites Volume 2. You won't regret it. I would have liked to have seen more original footage, however. I felt there was a bit too much taken from television and pay-per-view events. If they'd have reshot a lot of these matches on house shows, then this would have got a B+. But they didn't. They went with old reliable footage. They didn't take a chance, and so this gets a solid B-. But like I said, well worth your time and effort. And all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for listening. Next time, Union Smack will be going to UK fan favourites. Let's check that out, as this one was so good. But don't hold your breath. Until then, you can catch me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. You can catch Travis on Twitter at The Hibiki TMD. Log on to unionsmack.bigcartel.com, get yourself an official shirt, and go to completelynovel.com where you can purchase my Undertaker book, A Trip Down Death Valley. As I said earlier and last week, and in probably every podcast you've listened to for the past 2 weeks, I will be helming the channel until Travis returns. And you can catch me on Muted with Bubba. You can catch me on a Major League podcast of their own with TJ. And don't forget that the alternative is here with Colin and James Ebert. But until we meet again, cheerio, mates.